Broadcasting live to Bills Mafia worldwide with Greg Thompsett and Aaron Quinn.
Welcome to the NFL.
Doesn't matter what's happened before today. Today's a brand new day. It's a brand new season.
Your number one podcast for objective Buffalo Bills coverage. No matter where you are, we got you covered.
Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your host, Greg Thompson, along with my partner in crime, Aaron Quinn. Aaron, how does it feel to switch over to a new week and be ready for the Buccaneers?
You know what, man? Normally it would feel fantastic to just get that loss over with quickly, switch to a new team. This week, so you know me, Monday nights screw me up anyway. Yeah. I don't like it. And so then switching to a team and trying to cram in for a Wednesday show, really hard. I hate to be a complaining content creator, but it's a lot of work to get ready for this stuff and trying to watch a bunch of games from another team this far into the season. It's really hard. And then for it to be Tampa Bay as the team that we have to watch to try to rebound against makes me feel even worse. So thank God it's Christmas, and thank God we have a good guest to hopefully talk us through this.
Yeah, without further ado, tonight's show brought to you by Uncle Jumbo's and our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Use the promo code COVER1, download the Underdog Fantasy app. But we are joined by our friend, Tampa Bay Trevor Sikkema. How are we doing, sir?
I am doing great. I appreciate you guys asking me on the show, man. Like, this Cover One brand, like, you guys have been doing X's and O's stuff and like deep dives and like really covering your team really well. I've been reading you guys and following you guys for forever and like how you cover a team. And you're part of what has pushed me to when I was covering the Bucs, cover the Bucs a little bit deeper with their X's and O's stuff. So, man, this is really cool for me. I appreciate you guys having me on the show.
No, that's awesome. That means a lot, man.
Thanks for the kind words, man.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. And, you know, honestly, talk to us a little bit about this Buccaneers season. Obviously, we were talking pre-show. I hope you can whisper sweet nothings into our ear about how going 7-5 isn't the end of the world and things can end nicely. But now coming into this year, obviously, higher expectations, defending the title. And I think a lot of people, if you would ask them, you know, in your circles, were more targeted on this year than last year as kind of, hey, now you have everybody together. You kept the entire band together, you know, first time ever keeping all 22 starters from a defending champ. How has that transitioned into this year and really now having some real continuity? Yeah,
I mean, I was one of those people. I went into last year, especially when you look at how things were going during what was about to be a crazy COVID season. I mean, the COVID off season going into it, you know, you could, training camp, there's no practicing with guys. There were just all these rules about how much time you could actually spend with your new teammates. Sure, they added Tom Brady. Obviously, you're never going to say no to that. That's never a bad thing. But I just wondered how good they would be, because this is the first time in 20 years that Tom Brady was switching teams. He was going over to a new system, new coaching staff, new landscape, new home field advantages, new road challenges, literally everything for Tom Brady, basically outside of having Rob Gronkowski.
I was going to say, except for Gronk.
Which is not bad. A security blanket to have, the greatest tight end ever played.
Yeah, if you're going to have a binky, that's not a bad one.
Yeah, that's not too bad. And so outside of that, I went in last year saying, hey, this team's going to be good. Tampa's going to make the playoffs. I thought the Tampa was going to be a wild card team. That was my prediction. I still thought the Saints were going to win it, or the division last year. But I thought that the Bucs would probably be either a one and done or maybe make it to the divisional round. That's probably about it. Now, you kind of joked around that right there, saying like, hey, good things can happen to a team that struggles in the middle of the season and ends up being 7-5. They can end up winning the Super Bowl, because that's what the Bucs did last year. But, man, they caught it hot. They just hit everything at the perfect time. They were healthy. They were gelling. They had the chemistry. They got their lumps out. And, of course, it's not bad when you have the greatest winner of all time at the helm, making sure that things are possible, getting those young, inexperienced guys ready for some of those playoff games. So I was one of those people who was super shocked that they had as much success as they did. I thought this year was the year. I ultimately thought that this was going to be the year for the Buccaneers to look their best. And you know what? They have it points. And this is kind of one of those points where, like, this team is just clicking right now. There's certainly ways that they can get better. They're not a perfect team, but they're playing really well. And that's kind of been what this season has been. They got out of the gate. They played really good hot. They went up against a couple of teams early on. Obviously, they had the sandwich right there between the bye week where they played the Saints. They played Washington. They had a bye week in between. They lose both those games, which is a little bit crazy. You got the loss to the Rams as well. And so, like, all of those things factor into it. But a lot of good football that was being played around it. I think people really have a microscope on what Tampa was because of what you said, because you brought back the entire Super Bowl team, an unprecedented, never before done move. And so with that being the case, any failure you look at and you go, that can't be the case. That should not be the case. You shouldn't be learning. You're a Super Bowl champion. You got to get this out of the way. And it's just not how football works. That's not how the NFL works. Other guys on the other sideline, they get paid too, as they say. They're professionals. And so the Bucs, once again, have gone through their lumps a little bit throughout the season. Now, it's a little bit different than the Bucs of old, as some Bucs fans will know. You know, going through their lumps in old Tampa Bay teams meant going 3-13. Now they're sitting here with only 3 losses at 9-3. So it's a little bit different this time around. But, you know, I think throughout the season, the biggest issue with Tampa has been that can they get out of their own way thing. They had a big issue with penalties. Obviously, they suffered more injuries this year than they did last year. Guys in and out of the lineup, some adjusted chemistry things that they've had to deal with. All of that, I think, is kind of the story of their season. But with their record being what it is, with them still well within reach of that number 1 overall seed, you know that the talent's still there. When they're playing their best, they can beat anybody in the NFL. And that's just kind of where we are right here with the Buccaneers.
Yeah, and so let's dive right into this offense here. And normally I like to start with the quarterback skill positions and all that and work my way down. But I want to start with this offensive line because the Bills, obviously, this has been a hot topic for us. The offensive line, there's not a lot of consistency. There's a few holes in it. And I believe that Tampa Bay probably has the best overall offensive line. Definitely of anyone the Bills have played, and probably in the entire league, I think, across the board. I don't know that they have any of the highest top end guys in the league, but I think consistently through all 5 spots on the line, it's probably the best. The best. And
a point Aaron talks about a lot is that, you know, really the strength is a weak link. That's the biggest thing. Their weakest link is pretty dang good. Like when your 5th guy is that good, that's a really high floor.
Absolutely. And they're keeping Tom Brady clean, which is really what matters the most, right? When you have an aging quarterback, we know Tom Brady probably better than anyone of years of him just terrorizing us. Even when he was young, he wasn't mobile. And so for him to be able to go into his, retirement years leading up to retirement, staying clean, being able to play football is huge. Now the Bills defense, a lot of fans don't think this, but they are one of the higher pressure rate defenses in the NFL. They're getting pressure on quarterbacks. They've done it successfully all year. Something's got to give here in this matchup. I don't feel great about it for the Bills, but can you tell us a little bit about these guys on the offensive line and then how you see the Bills attacking them, and especially specifically in that pass game?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, when you look at the Buccaneers offensive line, you're right. You always want to look at the weakest link along the offensive line, because if there is a glaring weakness, it doesn't matter how good the other 4 guys are. You're good. There's going to be too many plays where they get exposed. The rest of the line get exposed. The chemistry's not there. The talent level is not what it needs to be in terms of a floor. And you're going to have a hard time winning football games. That's not the case with Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay's offensive line is incredible. I mean, Ryan Jensen was an unbelievable free agency signing who only seems to get better as they continue to get better. Ali Marpet, we know he's been fantastic for years. Alex Kappa's been able to come in and play really well at right guard. Tristan Wirfs, my God, what a steal of a draft pick that was. I mean, they get this guy as OT4 in the middle of the first round, and he's one of the best right tackles in the league. I don't know how else to say it. Like, he is already one of the best right tackles in the NFL. Not for his age, not for a rookie like he was last year. He's unbelievable. And then a lot of times over the last couple of years, people have pointed to the Buccaneers' left tackle spot with Donovan Smith, and they've said that's the glaring weakness. Donovan Smith, he'll give up a couple of sacks every single game. There's going to be a couple of plays that he takes off. That hasn't been the case over the last 2 years. He has also elevated his game and been fantastic. When you look at PFF's overall grades, Tampa Bay has the number 1 pass blocking offense in the NFL. They're also a top 10 run blocking offense. And you mentioned you're only as good as your weakest link. There's not a single starting offensive lineman on Tampa Bay's team right now that has an overall O-line grade below 70. Everybody else is above it. They've got 2 guys in the 70s and they've got 3 guys in the 80s, which is incredible to have across the board. And so it's really, there's no way around it. It's really tough to beat this Buccaneers offense because they give Tom Brady time. And then the thing is, guys, he doesn't need time. Tom Brady can get rid of the ball as fast as he possibly wants to. And so it's almost like It is. It's an embarrassment of riches. Everybody looks at this Tampa Bay roster and they talk about the wide receivers. They talk about Gronkowski, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown when he's in the lineup and not faking a vax card, right? Like all of this is what people love to talk about. But the truth of the matter is the embarrassment of the riches
starts up front.
Five big dudes that are right in front of them. That's
Absolutely.
the embarrassment of riches when it comes to this Buccaneers team. And my hat is off to the Bills and how they attacked this past offseason. Look, I know I was one of the big people that was like, you got to go after corner. Go get a corner too. Make it happen. And first round came by, second round came by, rest of the draft came by, and they really didn't address it. They addressed that front instead. And I think at the beginning of the year, you guys saw that really paid dividends. I think especially against that Kansas City game, right? That's the barometer game that everybody wanted to talk about. Can you build a defense that can now stop or limit Kansas City enough for the rest of this roster to take hold and for Buffalo to win? They did that. And I think that their plan of what they wanted to happen kind of happened. And I think the defensive line is playing well, but it just doesn't happen very often that teams best this Tampa offensive line enough to really rattle Brady. And it's just, that's the way, and kind of even what I was saying before, even if you get to him, even if you pressure him more than he's used to, this dude can get the ball out of his hands in 2 seconds. So,
right.
I don't make it to paint a gloom and doom picture, but it's so hard to expect a defensive line to do enough against how decisive Brady is, and then just straight up how well the offensive line is playing in front of him. And so, look, I really do. I love what Buffalo was able to do, getting some new blood, some new juice into that defensive line. I think it's paid off in a decent amount of ways. You mentioned really high pressure rate already for this team, but it's just hard to matter. It's hard to get that pressure enough against the Buccaneers. We just haven't seen it that many times for it to matter enough in a loss.
Now, if you're, staying on this offensive line for a second, if you're a Bills fan and you're looking at ways to attack, I know attacking Brady on the inside interior is the way to get at him. And I think that's actually where it's probably strongest right now for the Bucs trying to get at Brady. Is there anyone along this defensive line that you think will cause problems, get through a few times, or do you feel that confident that it's going to be a pretty clean day for Brady?
Well, I'm trying to think of guys who might be like matchup problems in terms of like length. I mean, you guys might be able to tell me like who's been playing on fire a little bit more than the other ones, because I know that
Ed Oliver.
It would be Oliver's quickness against Kappa is the only thing I can think of. That's the only thing I can think of.
So that would be one of them. And I would love to be able to say Oliver, because I was a big fan of his when he was coming out of Houston in the draft. And like, I really think that he's butted into a pretty dang good player. And so I would love to say that his quickness is firing off the line. Obviously a little bit of an undersized guy that he uses to advantage. If you line him up against Kappa enough, maybe, but man, the thing is that everybody looks at Kappa and they go, okay, I don't want to go up against Ryan Jensen. I sure as hell don't want to go up against Ali Marpet. Let's go after Alex Kappa. He's not that bad. He's pretty good. And so it's almost hard to kind of call him a weakness. Greg Rousseau, is he like a mainstay rotation guy for you guys?
That defensive end rotation is pretty weird. I think on passing down and specifically Mario Addison, Jerry Hughes are still getting the bulk of the reps there.
Okay, because
he's like second in snaps.
Do they kick him inside enough?
Rousseau, no.
Pretty. They kick Basham inside. They'll kick Obata inside.
Obata when he's healthy.
But most of the time they keep Rousseau. He's really good. His contained against the run is really
his run
good.
Defense is actually.
So they keep him outside to keep contained against the run.
And that makes a lot of sense. And the reason why I brought up Rousseau is because I studied him a lot when he was coming out of the draft, obviously. And what you love about him is you love the length. And there were so many times when he was playing at Miami that they would kick him inside to 3 or to 1 or to 0 text, whatever it was. And he'd fire off the ball and he'd get those long ass arms up on you. And all of a sudden those short arm centers are like, wait, what? And so it's just, I feel like that could have been maybe a nice little switch up if they were comfortable with him. I wasn't so sure if we'd see that early on in his career, because again, like he was a guy who needed to gain weight, gain strength, really find his new playing weight, because he fluctuated a lot in college.
They've done a couple of twists and stunts, not as much lining him up. But they've run some games where he ends up
a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that was one that I kind of thought of off the top of my head, but man, it's so hard to confuse this offensive line. They're so good right now. I think what beyond even the 1-for-1 talent that everybody will talk about with I think a lot of those guys is the chemistry that goes on really well. And I think that they're able to pass things off. They see things in the pre-snap. They understand the calls. They understand where pressure's coming from a lot of times. And, Brady also helps them call it out, right? Ryan Jensen's a veteran center. Brady's a veteran quarterback. And they can see a lot of times where pressure's coming from. So it's hard even when you get creepers pressures and simulated pressures and things like that. They know what's real, what's fake, what's coming, what's not. So that just kind of goes into the success overall of the offensive line. And
you even got a question here,
real quick here,
Trevor, asking if you think they'll extend or be able to afford to extend Jensen this offseason.
Afford's a completely different question, isn't it? Like
there's
the
always
money
in the banana stand.
the cap in today's age just doesn't make any sense. I don't know. Tom's going to sign 8 voided years, and somehow Jensen's going to.
I heard about it from a couple Bucs guys that I'm friends with. When I told them, I'm like, hey, brace yourselves. You're not going to be able to afford Godwin and David and Sue and everybody back all at once. Somebody's got to give. Like, you're not going to be able to afford everybody, and then boom. They find money hidden in the mattress, and all of a sudden everybody's back.
So it is really funny. And, from covering the Buccaneers for 3 years when I was with Peer Report, I learned a lot about the front office side of the organization. And when Tampa was really bad, it was easy to kind of say like, oh, they're this organization that's got like good guys in the front office, but like they don't have the things to take it over the top. Well, now they have the talent to take them over the top on the field. And they also still have those good guys in the front office. So like, Jason Light, man, he is a player's GM. Like he genuinely invests in these players and knows all of them and makes Tampa an enjoyable place to play, not just as a destination to win, but a destination to have a family and be treated right with contracts. I mean, you look at Mike Evans, man. Mike Evans has restructured his contract like 4 or 5 times with Tampa already. Levante David's done the same thing. And these dudes do that because of the culture that Tampa has set up. And I know we're kind of getting off on a tangent here, but people tell me all the time, they're like, there's no way Chris Godwin's coming back. There's no way they're going to bring Godwin. And I keep telling them, yes, he is. They're going to find a way, because I think that Jason Light and Mike Greenberg, who's the cap guy in Tampa Bay, like those guys are so great at not just the numbers and working things out to their advantage, but also treating these guys the right way to where when it comes to them saying, hey, we're going to take a little bit off the contract this year, but we're going to make sure it's guaranteed in the back part of it. You're going to get it. We've got Tom Brady. We got Tom freaking Brady right now.
And that clock's running out with Brady.
Yeah. Right. And those guys are going to be like, okay, you know what? I trust you. I trust you as a GM. I trust you as a cap guy. And I don't know how much that is the case around the rest of the league. I can only speak for Tampa and how
it's not everywhere for sure.
I've continuously just seen it work. So back to the Jensen question. They would love for Jensen to be there as long as Tom is. And I think Tom at least has 1 year after this. Now, after next year, if Tom keeps playing, they'll figure it out. Don't like steroid check the guy. Like Divine Trinity check the guy. Like see if he found the fountain of youth or like something. Because if he plays beyond next year, that's a little crazy. I always thought when Tom came last year that it was a 3-year thing with him. I thought it was.
He wanted to get to 45. He said 45 a lot of times.
I thought it was first year is an established year. We're going to figure out who we are. We're going to figure out what we need. Second year is our run at the title. Third year is our run at a repeat. And I thought that was their plan the whole time. Now they jumped the shark a little. Well, maybe not jump the shark because that's a bad saying. But they jumped their timeline a little bit early by winning that first one. But I do think the plan is still for him to have 2 years after that. So Jensen might sign a 1-and-1 kind of deal after this because he's getting up there in age as well. So they're going to make a run at him. They're not just going to be like, all right, well, see you, Jensen. I guarantee they're going to make a run at him, but who knows if he stays.
And they obviously proved the creativity in the past year that they can find a way to fit guys in.
Yeah, and winning Super Bowls helps convince guys to stay. So back to this offensive side of the ball. I'm not going to go through the skill position players individually because I think everybody knows who Tampa Bay is and who these skill position players are. But I really want to ask you more about sort of a strength versus strength and sort of a maybe not weakness versus weakness, but sort of overall aspects of this game. First of all, let's start with the strength versus strength. Tampa Bay, by every single metric, is one of the most pass heavy teams in the NFL and one of the best at doing it in the NFL. And the Bills, by almost every metric, are one of the best pass defenses in the NFL. Now, losing Trey White, I'm not sure what that's going to do to that pass defense. Obviously, it was not tested on Monday night in the first game without Trey White, with only 3 passes being thrown. But still kind of going into this matchup, these are 2 strengths for the teams. what gives in this matchup, in this strength versus strength? Are we going to see Brady just move the ball down the field at will, or are the Bills going to have to get in a shootout to win this thing? Or are they going to look at this Bills defense and look at what is a perceived weakness in the run game and take their chances there? Are they going to be the Bucs that we've seen, or are they going to kind of alter to the weakness of the defense?
Yeah. So for as much as I think the pass catchers get all the praise, right? I mean, like, this team is very comfortable being as balanced as they possibly can be. Now, I think that they fundamentally understand that you can't fully go 50-50 split. Like it's just the days of that are gone. And so certainly they're going to try to win the ball through Tom's arm and their aerial offensive weapons, because they have the capabilities to do so and score points in bunches. But they are also a team that really likes to run the ball. They like leaning on Leonard Fournette. They like leaning on Ronald Jones when he's not in the doghouse. And so I think that they're going to do that plenty. Sometimes it's been to the frustration of Bucs fans. Sometimes they feel as though Tampa's game plan yields closer contests throughout than it needs to, where they might like pull away in the fourth quarter or something like that, where they're just like, why don't you just keep your foot on the gas the whole time? But I think that Tampa just fundamentally, the way that the way that they built this team, for as much as it is Brady and they already had the passing weapons when he got there, they pride themselves a lot on being a very physical football team. We mentioned already the offensive line, but of course, one of the biggest and most boastful things that you could say about this Buccaneers team is that you do not run on them. Nobody freaking runs on them. They've got monsters in the middle. They've got great run defenders with fantastic energy on the edge. They've got Devin White, who can absolutely fly sideline to sideline. They've got one of the most smart, underrated linebackers in the NFL in Levante David. Like, that box is just loaded at all times with dudes who can stop the run individually and as a group. So when you talk about that physical nature, that also goes to the run game. And I think that they pride themselves on handing the ball off and being able to hit you and give you a couple bruises, make sure you're hitting the ice bath after the game, all that kinds of stuff. So, I'm not going to lie. I love Tre'Davious White. I wish so badly he was playing in this game, because this was a massive matchup that I had circled on my calendar that I'm like, hell yeah. But Bills secondary, two of the best safeties, maybe the best safety tandem in the game that the Bills have, Tre'Davious White with them. I was looking forward to this so much, and I hate that Tre'Davious White is hurt. I don't know if you guys saw this, but Mike Evans even said when he was at the podium today, he like gave big ups, and he thoughts, prayers, everything to Tre'Davious White, because he mentioned how great of a player he was and how he really wished he could have gone up against him this week. But I think we're obviously giving the advantage to the Bucs in the passing game, but I think it's a little bit closer once you start dealing with those two great safeties in the back end. I think they'll lean on the run game a little bit more than they have in the past, because I think that they know that's where they might have an advantage, to your question, on what Buffalo can bring to them this week.
Yeah. So flipping over to the other side, and we look at this defense, it's been, obviously you talked about that front seven. I think that's the names that people recognize. And obviously, Vita Vea is the secret love child of Star Lotulelei, and I think maybe Maui from Moana. I'm not sure. But just an enormous, monstrous human. He looked happier that he lost a tooth. That's a really intimidating thing. Like, he looked like he enjoyed the fact that he lost a tooth. I don't love that. Obviously, people know. I think some people know Ndamukong Suh by reputation that he had previously. He's still a fantastic player, a really, really stout, consistent player. And then when you're bringing Jason Pierre-Paul and Shaq Barrett off the edges, that's tough to deal with. I think it sounds like Devin White, maybe took a little bit of a step back this year. I'm not sure, talk about that, but how has, the rotation has been interesting. I know we were huge fans of Joe Tryon coming out of the draft. We've been happy with Rousseau. He's done well, but it's been we've noticed some of the highlights of Tryon being, oh man, would have been nice if we had snagged him. How has that worked in the front seven with the rotation, figuring out how do you get more reps for a guy like Tryon when it means taking Pierre-Paul or Barrett off, and then how have things gone in this second year with Devin White when it looked like sky was the limit in the Super Bowl? Yeah, so I mean,
as much as fans really want Joe Yinka to get in there because of the flash plays, the team just has too many veterans in front of them, and they're right in the middle of what they're hoping to be another Super Bowl run, or at least a deep playoff run, and you kind of play your veterans. He's just unfortunately behind a really deep defensive line at edge, because you look at Shaq Barrett, okay, he had the 19.5 sacks a couple of years ago. Well, he's not that kind of sack master this year, but he's got great all-around game. He's great at defending the run. He's great at getting to the quarterback. He's not that crazy elite guy that he was during that season, but he's such a solid all-around edge presence that you don't want to take him off the game because he can affect against the pass and the run. Jason Pierre-Paul, I mean, dude's an Iron Man. Injuries, fingers,
it doesn't age.
Like nothing can stop this dude. Like it's unbelievable. It wasn't, but I think 3 years ago, he was almost playing the most snaps of any defensive end still in the NFL. And he just doesn't, he never comes off the field. And so I really do think that if it was like any other defensive end, aging defensive end, other than Jason Pierre-Paul, we'd be seeing a lot more of Trajan Shoyinka. But that's kind of just where he is in the rotation. And then kind of to your Devin White question, you know, I think it's funny, and I don't blame you at all whatsoever for kind of setting up that question the way that you did, where you said like, wow, he had like an unbelievable playoff run. He ended the season on such a high note. So many players talked so well of him. He was so high on the NFL's like top 100 list, voted on by the players, all that kinds of stuff. The hype was just like way overblown. He had an unbelievable playoff run where he was just making splash play after splash play, you know, cutting through the offensive line and making plays in the backfield, you know, making big time hits over the middle, all that kinds of stuff. And people saw those things. Devin White is a fantastic football player. He's somebody that you absolutely love to have in the middle, unlimited energy, sideline to sideline speed, great strength, all of that. He's just not great in coverage. He's just he's a little stiff in coverage. He's a little slow to react. He just doesn't anticipate nearly as well as he does when he can click and close and trigger downhill when it comes to defending the run. And that's just kind of the way that it is. He's just not nearly as comfortable and confident in coverage, even with stuff that's straight in front of him. Like often they will have him take the running back, whether he's going to the flat or he's coming to the middle and he's choosing to go one way or the other. Like they will be like, okay, you don't even have to like backpedal and try to feel a tight end or a backside dig route or something like that. They will be like, okay, we're just keeping everything in front of you. And he's just not as comfortable doing that. So I don't want to be too hard on him because he is a fantastic presence for him, but there's no doubt about it. He is a better run defender than he is a pass coverage guy. So, you know, I think the best pass catching backs in the NFL, they tend to really give him trouble. That tends to be an area where you can really exploit what's going on. Atlanta Falcons were able to do that with Cordarrelle Patterson a bit, you know, like that kind of stuff, where if you get a guy out of the backfield who can really put him on skates or get him in conflict, that's just where he's at his worst. But when it comes to the identity of this front seven and making sure that you're stout and run defense, he fits that bill, no doubt.
He fires that gun. It's still working just fine. With the coverage unit, you know, obviously there are windows in time here where it was, you know, holding out signs at the corner being like, hey, any fresh bodies that could come in and play.
Right.
I don't love the fact that we're catching them now coming with Sean Murphy-Bunting coming back, Carlton Davis coming back. Things are starting to round back into form of more of what you envision that secondary being. How are they looking in their first reps coming back here?
Yeah, so I mean, from a Tampa perspective, I mean, this is what they needed. And when Tampa was kind of struggling in the middle of the season there, when they struggled against the Saints and when they lost against Washington, a lot of people were, and even in some of their victories, when they just were not looking good at corner, a lot of people were kind of freaking out. And I was trying to temper that and just say to them, like, hey, none of these guys are season-ending injury players. As of right now, the plan is that they're still getting even Carlton Davis back at the beginning of December. You get a handful of games to get them really back up to NFL speed, and you get all of these guys back for the playoff run. That was still all in the cards. So I was trying to talk people off the ledge, if you will. And now we're at that point. Now, Jamel Dean's concussion protocol, I don't know. I think he's a guy who's probably going to be out of, like, I think he's going to play this weekend, but concussion protocol, I guess you never know. But if he plays, that's everybody. Carlton Davis is back. Sean Murphy-Bunting is back. Jamel Dean is back. Jamel Dean's also been playing some really great ball lately, which has been great to see him step up. Carlton Davis was fantastic at the end of last season, beginning of this season before he got hurt. And then Sean Murphy-Bunting is one of the most versatile nickel and outside corners that you have. Now, all that to say, nobody covers Stephon Diggs. So, like, it's like Stephon Diggs is going to get his. That's just the way that it is. Whether it's Sean Murphy-Bunting covering him, whether it's Carlton Davis, whether it's Jamel Dean. I think that no matter who you put on there, Diggs is going to get his. You just don't want him to absolutely kill you like he has against some other teams. But that's kind of the way that it's shaping up for the secondary. You got Antoine Winfield Jr. back there. Unfortunately, obviously, they don't have Mike Edwards as well because of the Antonio Brown collateral damage, fake vax card thing. They don't have Jordan Whitehead. I believe he was out of practice again with a calf injury. And so, you're kind of wondering who that second safety is going to be. They're going to have a rotation of guys that I think are going to be in there. But
I can't lie. I didn't know a lot about Andrew Adams.
Yeah.
You're right. And so he's just kind of like, he's just a veteran guy, which is good. I mean, it's good to, when you have to have a fill-in player, you're not having a fill-in player that's also like learning the game for the first time. You at least have a guy who's been around the block and who's a veteran. So they at least have that going for them. But there's no doubt about it that this Buccaneers secondary is starting to get on a roll. And I was doing a little bit of reading earlier in the week just about the Bills and kind of things that they've struggled with. And it seems like, and you guys can correct me or add to this, it seems like Josh Allen is going through the same thing that every big-time quarterback in the NFL is going through right now, and that is with defenses playing a lot more too high coverages, forcing you to play things underneath and mitigating those deep risks and really just almost asking you to be a little bit more of a game manager than you might prefer. Tampa plays cover, according to PFF's database, which I looked at before I kind of came on here, they play cover 3 the most, but then they play quarters, they play too high right after that. So it's single high stuff, but they really do. They're very versatile in how they align their safeties. And so they have the capabilities, I think, to be able to do what might frustrate the Bills' passing attack. And so I would probably expect that even if you might look at the Bucs and say, okay, they play a decent amount of cover 1, cover 3, maybe that's what they'll do. They've got that flexibility to adjust to see a lot of too high against the Bills.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest problems, and before I ask your prediction, because you'll like this stuff, is that cover 2, and we've been talking about it all week with the inefficiency in the run game, is it invites the run, and the Bills can't help themselves but continue to run into the too high safety looks, and it's so inefficient, and it's not getting the ball moving. And so I think that's also part of what's sort of neutering Josh in the passing game, is when they see those looks that invite you to run. Peyton Manning talked about it with Eli on one of the broadcasts recently. When you see cover 2, you run right into it, and the Bills continue to run right into it and take the bait from teams, and it hasn't worked out great. So that's another part of that too high shell look that's going on. But let's kind of dive in. Give us sort of your general feeling of how this game's going to go, what you think this game's going to be like, and then we're going to put you on the spot, and I want to get a score prediction from you before you get out of here.
Okay, well, I will say that before the season, my Super Bowl prediction was Bills-Bucs. That was my Super Bowl prediction before the season. And as the season went on, as obviously the Bills started looking good and the Bucs obviously were looking good, I was feeling good about myself. I was like, okay, I'm going to get this. I'm going to get this right now. Obviously, the Bills have kind of had a back and forth with wins and losses. And here they are, 7-5. Now, if they get themselves a win here this week, that will kind of obviously get them more back on track. You hope they finish the season strong. Bucs have the 29th easiest schedule right now, according to Pro Football Focus's metrics, and this is basically the only tough game they have left. So if Tampa wins this game, there's a damn good chance that they're either going to be in the 1 seed or they're going to be right there, either tied or 1 game behind whatever Arizona ends up doing. So I think that in that sense, Tampa's not really going to sleepwalk off the couple of wins and the bounce backs that they've had over the last couple of weeks. I think that they very much know that this is in their house, and if they win this game, they might be able to host throughout the entire playoffs, which I know that they would very much like. So
and get a break.
Right. Well, yeah, of course, which is massive, which is huge. And so I don't expect any kind of a letdown here from Tampa Bay. They've had a couple of those in the past where they've just been super slow out of the gate. And then, of course, Buffalo as well. Like, they got to win this game. They have to win this game, and or they start getting into really not just, hey, we're letting the Patriots run away with the division. Like, we're talking like, okay, maybe miss the playoffs, which would be a colossal disappointment. And I do not want to happen, not just because they were my Super Bowl pick, because I don't want to see that with this Bills team. I think
it might take Twitter offline.
This team is way too talented. I need this Bills team in the playoffs. And so I think this is going to be a game of the week kind of game. I think that even if you are not a Bucs fan, Bills fan, I think that you should have eyes on this game, because I think these are two teams that are going to give themselves the absolute best. And even though they're a little bit beat up on each side, I think it's going to be fantastic. Score prediction, I'm going to go with Bucs 27, Bills 17. I said the Bucs by 10.
All right.
We appreciate it, man. Tell the folks where they can find more of your good work.
Well, you can find, as you probably heard me reference a couple of times, Pro Football Focus. That's the place that I'm working now. It's where I'm doing all my articles, all my mock drafts, all my scouting reports, all my game previews, everything. And we also have an NFL show that we do at 11 a.m. on Sundays on PFF's Twitter and YouTube. It's a live stream. So you guys that are here watching this, all about the live stream life. So you can get on the show, you can comment. We're making sure that we get in on the chat all the time. So come hang out with us 11 a.m. on Sundays before we get you ready for the big games.
And a lot of people, a lot of Bills fans out there, they hear PFF, they get mad because the grades haven't always been kind to the players that we love. But what I will say, and I've been part of that, giving PFF a hard time about stuff. But what I will say about you guys, I use the site every single day. The data and the way you display the data in a user-friendly way, I use it every single day. It's a big part of what I do getting ready for the show. So we do appreciate the work from you guys, and everybody out there. Use PFF. It will make you a better fan.
Yeah, and as I always like to tell people, I grade personally, I grade every single player that you hate. So no, but it is, man. It's I'm in your shoes as well. I use PFF every single day before I work for him. I started working for him about 4 or 5 months ago, and I can tell you on the other side of things now, nobody's working harder to make sure that they are trying to perfect how they come up with those grades and the things that they're doing wrong, the things that they're doing right, emphasizing all that. It is an ever working process. I know people think of PFF and think, oh, those are guys who just set up a metric and just let it run and like never touch it because they're above criticism. I promise you that's not the case. We're always tweaking it. We're always trying to make sure that it's as good as it can possibly be. So
we appreciate
any personal grade hate, just send it over, Tim.
Hopefully we're back to a more normal world this year, be able to have another beverage of eats this year. Hopefully get back into the regular world again.
Would love it, man. Would love it. Appreciate you guys having me on, man. This is a blast.
Appreciate
awesome.
it. Thanks.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right. Yeah, obviously awesome to have somebody like Trevor on and to be able to go through and talk it. And coming from, he not only covered the team in kind of a similar vein of how, you and I and Eric have done, but now moving into a group like PFF and seeing behind the curtain there, it's someone that, I really carries a lot of weight with me to be able to hear, the way he talks about it. And I think that, he's in an interesting spot with a team that is fantastic. It's hard to, poke holes in this roster right now. It's arguably the most talented roster in the NFL. I think that I don't hate the fact that it's become such an accepted element that, hey, you just don't run against Tampa Bay. Like it's like, I almost like that it gives them a get out of jail free card of, hey, this game's okay to throw the ball 50 times. Cause I kind of wouldn't mind seeing that a little bit more, that I like it, that just become such, you heard, Frank Reich talk about it, that, hey, even when he has Jonathan Taylor, you don't ram it into this defense. It's just silly to be able to waste the bullets there. So I'm curious to see, do you think all the talk of McDermott and Dable being on the same page and the desire for balance, do you think that's going to be something they're going to try to prove a point this week? Or I'm hoping, and I'm clinging to Dable's comments today about being game plan specific and week to week, that they're not going to be stubborn and try to force it against by far the best run defense in the NFL.
Yeah. And so I think real quick too, if you follow me on Twitter, I put out earlier a little bit of a thread. I didn't get a lot of traction on, and that's okay, because some of the stuff when you start putting out data and charts and stuff like that doesn't always get the traction. But I saw it a number of times, and I did retweet Dan Fetz, and it's nothing against him, but he's probably the more prominent person that put out this idea that the Bills somehow, one, are less balanced or trying to form more balance than they were a year ago. And everybody keeps telling me, what happened to that offense that we saw last year? They were passing all the time. They were so pass friendly. Bills are passing at a higher rate in the first 3 quarters of a game. I took out the fourth quarter of the game. They're passing 61% of the time. It's 4th highest in the NFL. So they are one of the most pass heavy teams. Then I looked at, early passing situations. They're still in those neutral pass situations when you don't have the lead or the game guaranteed to you. They're still the top team by quite a bit in the league. So they're still very aggressive in the pass. So I think there's this idea of a perception versus reality going on right now, that they're not as aggressive as they were a year ago trying to pass the ball. That's just not true. They really are. It's that they aren't passing an efficient rate, when you look at the EPA and stuff like that, which I'm not a big fan of expected stats, but I think it does tell you, they're not passing to the efficiency that they were a year ago.
It has relevance.
Yes.
I think some people rely on it a bit too much, but it has relevance.
But sometimes as football fans, and I felt this way too a little bit before I started digging into the stats, you feel like something is different than it is. And when we dig into the stats, you realize, well, shoot, they're passing more often.
The same idea as we talked about New England, how it felt when they were running on us versus when you step back and looked at it, be like, well, it was 11 first downs and 241 total yards. Like in 14
3 of the runs were 40-something% of the production.
It wasn't, I guess it wasn't really as bad as it felt, but it feels demoralizing. It feels frustrating. It feels like, oh my gosh, they're just sucking my soul out every time they run the ball for 6 yards. But ultimately, a 6-yard run is no different than a 6-yard pass.
Yeah, and so I do think when they talk about establishing balance, I think that they're talking about, again, it comes back to running efficiency, right? Like, I don't think they want to run the ball more. I think they want to run the ball better and allow that balance to exist. And it's somewhere in the 60-40 range. I think that's pretty much league-wide. You're seeing a 60-40 split year in and year out over the league. Here's the other thing that's weird, man. When you go look at DVOA, I pulled that up too. People are mad at their second down rushing. In those second down situations, the Bills are like the 4th best running team in the league in those second down situations. So I don't want to see it either. I'd rather see them passing more often, but it is something that the Bills are actually doing pretty well at. This one's different. I'll run it by real quick for people that are looking. This is another narrative, I think, that is a perception versus reality type of thing where the word soft is being tossed out about this Bills team. And first of all, I take offense to that. Period. Full stop. If you're going to call football players soft sitting behind your computer and sitting on a podcast, that's absolutely ridiculous to me.
Sitting on your couch eating Fritos.
Dude, I couldn't even take a snap from an NFL center. It would break my hand. Like, calling these guys soft is absolutely ridiculous. I think it's totally unprofessional. Anyone that's in the media saying it, I'm calling you out. I think it's absolutely ridiculous to call a team soft. Now, if anything, I think the Bills are probably over aggressive. And I think that's what's hurt them in the run game a number of times. It isn't a lack of ability to be a physical team. This is a DVOA from Football Outsiders. In the NFL, this takes all the NFL and it takes who your opponent is down in distance. They are number 1 in the NFL on 3rd and short and 4th and short. You are not a soft team when you're stopping big offensive linemen, big backs in 3rd and short. So I think that's another narrative that's not right. But to answer your question, Greg, I think you see a heavy passing attack in this game. And I think we still see the 60-40-ish splits. There's that early, for people that are watching or not listening, this is the early down pass frequency. And Tampa Bay is right behind them with Kansas City. Those are 2 of the most aggressive pass teams in the league.
And those were the top 3 last season too.
Yes. And so the Bills are still, people are saying, what happened to this offense? This offense isn't the same as it was a year ago. I think people are seeing the lack of Isaiah McKenzie jet sweep stuff, which started to fade away as the year went on anyway last year. And they're thinking that the offense has changed. The concepts are still the same. Yeah. They're still passing with a super aggressive nature to them.
Eric spent a ton of time today explaining that they're still running with Josh Allen the same amount that they did last year too.
Yes. It just doesn't feel that good because the efficiency isn't quite where it was. And so this graphic right here, early down pass rate plus the EPA efficiency that I was talking about. So you see, again, for people that are watching, you can see, and for people that are listening, the Bills are number 1 in pass rate at 64%. But then you look at the drop back EPA, and if you were to filter, this is a graphic, you can't filter it, they drop down to 14th in EPA. So that's where really the disconnect, in my opinion,
some less efficiency in the way that they've done it.
Exactly. And some of that's how they're being defended. Like Trevor was talking about, safety stuff, bracketing Diggs, trying to take Diggs out of the game. Like this
same reason Patrick Mahomes has struggled. Same reason we've seen Justin Herbert take a step back in his sophomore year.
Right.
Some of those guys live off the fact that, hey, I can throw balls that other humans can't. And when you give me one-on-one down the field and you call it 50-50, it's not 50-50 when I throw it. Right. And now teams are realizing, oh, we can just take that away and force you to be, the old Derek Carr offense and the that time, what Tom Brady loves to do is that, oh, I'm fine dinking and dunking down the field. I'll give last week. What did he give? Chris Godwin 15 catches.
Tom Brady's begging people to play cover 2.
Yeah, he said, please play cover 2. It's fine. I'll just keep giving it to these guys, little dump offs, and nobody touches me. This is lovely. Yeah. Josh and Patrick and Herbert and all those guys, they they want to show off the cannon. They know that they bring an added dimension to the game. So when you talk about can you stay disciplined, it's hard when you know you bring more value with those explosive plays. We talk about toxic differential all the time.
Right.
Toxic differential often comes from air yards. It's not normally yak. It's normally air yards. So
definitely not with the Bills.
Yeah. So, and Michael here joking, defenses are allowed to change how they defend Allen. Is that legal? I'd love to look into the statute to that state by state, but we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, so I think they do come out and pass. It's the way to attack this team, and I do think, unfortunately for the Bills, I believe in this Bills defense. I do believe in Dane Jackson's ability and Levi Wallace's ability, but we talked about this when Trey went down, Greg. This is the one matchup.
Yes.
Having Trey White,
the whole schedule, the whole remainder of the schedule.
Yes.
I'm not all that concerned, and honestly,
not even the playoffs that much.
Most of the AFC playoffs, the Chargers and the Chiefs are about it. Like Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, and then Tyreek Hill. That's about it. The rest of the AFC playoff teams, that's fine. I'm good with it with the guys we have. But this game, or if they go on in a miraculous run and make it to the Super Bowl, those are the kind of games where I'm like, oh, I really wish we had Trey here to at least cover one of them. Like I'm okay with Taron Johnson against Chris Godwin. I actually think it's okay. Like, I think he's functional. He's going to get beat a couple times.
Safety help, yeah.
People are going to get mad that he got roasted, but, Chris Godwin beats everybody a couple times. I don't know what we do with Mike Evans. I just don't know. I don't have any clue, because I think
nobody really does.
If Levi Wallace or Dane Jackson are going to be capable, we're going to have to pray that referees are having one of those, hey, let the boys play game, because either it's going to be a whole bunch of catches getting mossed or a bunch of DPIs, because he's so big and imposing. All you can do is interfere with him to stop him.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I hope that anyone listening, I know not everyone that's on Twitter is going to listen on Sunday, to judge these cornerbacks by what they're going up against. Because when you turn him on and turn on this film, and even Godwin, like, they're mossing guys all the time. They're making catches when they're totally covered. The Bills are going to give up receptions, guys. Dane Jackson and Levi Wallace are going to give up receptions. To me, the big thing is limiting those big ones, right? Like, if they can limit the big ones downfield and try to keep everything in front of
15, 20 yarders, not 35, 40 yarders.
Yes, that's going to be huge, but they're going to give up receptions. It's going to be trying to make – Brady, though, still is putting the ball in harm's way a number of times, and he's missing. The accuracy is still not exactly where it was in the past. So
you look at that Washington game and that New Orleans game, he wasn't sharp. It wasn't just the other things going on. It wasn't even a ton of sacks. He wasn't sharp, and they were able to throw a couple things at him.
Even that Atlanta game, there was some, even though they were efficient, there was some that, went down into the ground that were interceptable. People didn't come up with it. The Bills need to capitalize on those plays, and it can make up for some of the receptions you're giving up. But I think it's going to have to be a shootout. So I do think the offense has to get into the passing game and be aggressive with it.
Speaking of which, here with our Uncle Jumbo's player spotlight of the game, who are you looking for to step up? Do you think it's as simple as we need a monster Stephon Diggs game? With the guys that are back, we've seen. I'm kind of hoping for a Gabe Davis game here, because I think Carlton Davis is a very technical guy. I expect them to try to put him on Trey. Sean Murphy-Bunting's a physical guy. He's what he matches up more logically to Gabe Davis on the outside. I don't think they really want him against Emmanuel Sanders. So I'm curious there. I like the physical matchup with Gabe Davis. I wouldn't mind a bounce back game here from Emmanuel Sanders. Yeah. I expect them to give a lot of attention of Winfield plus Davis against Diggs, and to make it hard and say, hey, beat us elsewhere. I like Knox against their backup safety, and I like Emmanuel Sanders against a more physical guy like Murphy-Bunting, but not as quick in and out of his breaks.
Yeah, I like everything you just said there. I did that pregame show with Tilt Money and Rob Quinn, and I picked Gabe Davis to be the standout player of last week's game, and he almost was. He had the touchdown. Yeah. He almost had a second one. Yeah. And I think even in the run game, him getting involved in blocking has been a huge plus. I think he's earned the right to get more reps here as the season goes on. Yeah. But the guy that I'm looking to, Greg, is Cole Beasley. I've been talking about it for weeks. They got to get him going. I think, people talk about this feed Diggs narrative. Diggs has been getting fed, not last week as much, but for the most part this year, he's similar pace, going on, getting fed like a true number one wide receiver does. To me, Cole Beasley needs to start getting fed a little bit more. I was hoping last week for him to get kind of like a 10 catch game to get really going. I would like to see something like that to get him going again. He's a chain mover for this team. And I think
he needs to be the replacement for the running game this week when you
Exactly.
can't run into Vita Vea's belly over and over again. He needs to be that replacement, 3 and 5 yarders to him to keep the chains moving.
In that quick passing game, like they can get pressure on Josh, and I'm a little bit worried about that with this offensive line. And if they are going to play that too high shell look, Beasley's that guy to beat the zone. So getting him going, I think, is super huge to getting teams out of these too high shell looks and getting things going, getting that quick passing game going. We saw Josh Allen was able to get that quick passing game going against New Orleans a little bit. I want to see more of that, but I want to see Beasley involved in it. So for me, I need him to get going here soon, because I'm also starting to question, is he dropping off at all at this point in his career? And the Bills have a decision to make going into next year. If Beasley doesn't start to get the similar type production as we saw a year ago, is there a spot for him on this roster going forward? I need to know that here in the next month.
Yeah, and Ben here asking, and I'll combine it with some of I've gotten that question quite a few times from a salary cap standpoint. So obviously from the injury report, he's getting more frequent veteran rest days.
But they're not listing him as injured.
Correct. So I'm going to take them at their word and say that his ribs are healed and that he's healthy. But, I just, it's hard to know what's left. And I think we're going to find out here down the stretch that we need him to be a bigger part of this. And that I don't know, I think there have been enough games where we've seen him this season very much featured per se. It's not like he's not getting any run at all. Like we've had multiple games this season where he's getting those double-digit target games. It's just we haven't seen one in a little bit. The last one was on Halloween against the Dolphins. Actually, I take that back. Even the Jacksonville game, he had 11 targets. We've had 4 games this season with 13, 13, 13, and 11, and even another game with 9 targets. Like he's had multiple this season. The last 4 weeks, it's been 2, 5, 5, and 3. Yeah. We need to find out, okay, part of that, I think we know pretty clearly, was them managing his ribs. He wasn't inactive, but he was basically scrapping it together to keep it up. This needs to be when we find out. We don't really know if it would or wouldn't have been in the New England game. You heard Josh talk about he was going to go to the outside because if the wind got a ball and it got tipped up, less bad could happen on the outside. He wasn't going to throw into the middle of the field where the wind could give it, and if it blows something away, it could blow into a defender's arms. He wanted it, if it's going to get blown, it's going to get blown out of bounds. So this is the week that we're going to find out, is that really there? Anything else concerning with the rest of the injury report here?
So that Feliciano is still on IR.
He has not been activated yet, so he doesn't need to be listed on the injury report. We will find out more as the week goes here. Our man Kyle Trimble in the comments on the right here saying Feliciano still on IR with a left calf injury. Hopefully we see his activation here this week, because we haven't seen it yet.
And that would be probably, I think the limited injuries, we've seen them sort of progress most of the time through the week. So I think Starr will probably be fine in play. I don't know about Obata with the hip. We'll see. But Feliciano is the one that's concerning to me, because we had this talk sort of offline a lot about them not activating him early in the week and just kind of assuming that, hey, he's back and he's at practice, he's going to play. And then they didn't activate him for a game in the wind, where you wanted to run the ball and get going. You wanted him to be out there, and they didn't activate him. So I don't know what's up there. And then him still not being active going into the early part of the week here this week. I don't know that it's games that Sean McDermott's playing. I'd like to think that it is, but maybe there is some type of, hey, he's not where we thought he would be, even though that window got down. So that window is also going to be closing here in another 10 days or so. Correct. How many? Yeah, that
they have through this week.
Yeah.
And into the way that they open it up, they would have until the Monday after the Carolina game.
Okay, so they got some time.
That was intentional.
Yeah, they got some time, but this is an all hands on deck game, dude. And if he is,
it's critical.
Even a little bit better than Eichbacher, and you want to get that best 5 out there, he's got to get active here.
Well, we've talked about it. It doesn't have to just be how individually better he is than Eichbacher, where we both know it's not by a lot. I think I've argued even more so than you that I think he is better than Ike Bacher, but it's because the difference between how much better he is in run blocking versus Ike Bacher being a little bit better in pass blocking is a positive trade-off. He's not all of a sudden a miraculous one. The one area that I think could have some, additional value is the communication and continuity between Morris and Dawkins, that he just has more reps together with them, easier, more fluid communication, knows the handoff patterns and the calls, and contributes to picking out the blitzes and is better part of that planning mode. Sure. I think that he could have a positive impact there, even if individually he's not just a superior talent. He's a similar player to Ike Bacher. I think he might add a little bit more in that area, or I hope. I'm probably clinging at that just in desperation, but I'm hoping that he's a little bit better there and that's a net positive for the group.
Yeah, and so if it is, it's all hands on deck. So that's the one I'm keeping an eye on here this week to make sure that he somehow gets activated, hopefully earlier, and we're not waiting all the way to the last minute to see that happen.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, like I joke all the time, Sean McDermott loves gamesmanship more than any human does. So he certainly could be right up to Saturday afternoon for no other reason other than that. But I think we'll have a better idea based on the practice reports during the week. And how he's taking
and some of the video when they finally get media with the video.
Yeah. If he's lining up with the starting line, that's a pretty good indicator, but we'll see. I want to see it to believe it. So, we're down to it, man. What's your prediction of the game?
Yeah, so this one's going to probably get me killed a little bit because I know the Bills need this one. I really do. I get it. I get the tension of Bills Mafia. We've been talking about it now a couple weeks in a row here, or at 2 out of the last 3 weeks, Greg. We've been talking about how they back themselves into this corner. The season's not over. It really isn't. We've talked about quite a bit. Really smart dudes like Warren Sharp and Solak and all these people say, hey, this team's still by almost every measure one of the better teams in the NFL.
Ben Baldwin put out there the metric and said, hey, there's an alternate universe somewhere where the Bills are 10-2 with the exact same performance they've had this year. Looking at the metrics of, I think it was for down conversion, like how often you convert for first downs and touchdowns and how often you stop other teams from converting for first downs and touchdowns, which is by far the best indicator of success on a football field. And that the Bills are like in their own stratosphere off by themselves as the best combination of offense and defense. And they're 7-5. And he's just explaining that, hey, there's another world here where they're 10-2 and just planning on when they can start their vacation.
Right. Yeah, and the toxic differential isn't out yet, so we didn't get those graphics today. They didn't update the Bills games, but they're still going to be in that top 5 when that's over for the week. So the season's not over, and even if they do drop this game, the season's still not over. There's still plenty of paths to the
Honestly,
playoffs.
They need to go 3-2 in the last 5 games to make the playoffs. 4-1 is a lock. 3-2 is what I think you showed. What 98%?
10-7. Yeah, it's pretty high.
10-7 is like 98% likelihood.
Yeah, it's pretty high likelihood, and I do think that's for me. If I had to do a prediction of how the last going to go, I think it goes somewhat like that. But I think this is one of the losses. I really do. Everything that I'm seeing on film, looking at of this week, I just get a real bad feeling about this game. I think that it's going to turn into a shootout. And I haven't seen this Bills offense be able to win a shootout. I think they hurt themselves too consistently. Tampa doesn't as much, like they're not going to get into the red zone, and Brady's going to take some awful sack, and there's going to be a flag on them and put them out of field goal range, and they're going to have to punt. It's a Bills thing this year. That's where the Bills are really hurting themselves. We talk about the red zone efficiency. Go back and watch that Patriots game in the red zone. It's not Brian Daboll. I don't think that's the problem. I think everybody wants to scapegoat Brian Daboll and the changes of this offense that are the problem. Go back and watch those red zone reps again. You see bad sacks getting taken, bad penalties, pushing them back further, putting them in long situations in already a short field. Like those things are compounding and cause the problems in the red zone. Then you add the win where you can't convert field goals. So the Bills need to not be able to do that. If they cannot do that and stay in a shootout and prove that they can get in a shootout, there's definitely a chance. But I think it is a little bit of a shootout, and I think the Bucs end up winning 31-27, and maybe it's a late Bills touchdown to make it feel a little bit closer at the end, and they just never get fully close.
Yeah, and it's there's different combinations where I can see a path to victory.
Definitely.
I think that they have the weapons to do this. Honestly, I don't follow the Buccaneers, religiously and closely. I knew about the freaking MASH unit in their secondary. And then when I start preparing and I look last week, I'm like, oh God, I didn't know both Carlton Davis and Sean Murphy-Bunting were both back.
Yeah.
Oh man, I was kind of hoping on picking on these other, street free agents and the skeletal remains of Richard Sherman. And like, I was kind of looking forward to that. And now all of a sudden I'm like, oh, so the one area I thought we had the biggest advantage is now kind of mitigated. They have their starters back. We're not going to be able to run the ball. We're a bad rush offense. They're an elite rush defense. I hope we scrap that completely. I'm literally fine with a 90-10 game in this kind of game. And like you said, some Josh Allen scrambles, a couple runs, some screens, some short passes to Beasley, some short, hey, activate Stevenson or McKenzie and get some pop passes and little pieces to supplement the run game. Don't be dumb and ram Zach Moss and Devin Singletary into Vita Vea just to prove a point. But I think the area that we would need to be able to do this is to just outscore them and to have a shootout. I think we hang. I think that we're in it. I can't try to pretend to be an objective analyst and look at this and say that I think the Bills are going to win. I think that the spread is pretty accurate. I think that the over-under is accurate, if even not high enough. It's the highest one of the week at 53.5. And I think it's the highest one of the week because this is going to be the highest scoring game of the week. I think it's back and forth. I think it's a heavyweight fight with haymakers. I think the Bills score multiple times. I think Tampa Bay scores just enough. I have it 38-35 Tampa. I think that we see an awesome, exciting game. I think there's a chance that the Bills have the ball last and score on that last drive. I don't think we're going to be able to stop them. And right now, we've shown the proclivity to make the mistake when it matters. I hope they turn that around. I think they could lose this and win the last four and finish 11-6 and still be hot going into the playoffs.
Yeah.
I hope they win on Sunday. I'm going to be desperately rooting for it. I can't in good conscience predict it. This Tampa Bay team is elite and they're playing at a really high level right now.
Sometimes a bruise gets worse before it gets better. And I think that's where the Bills season's heading right now. It's just a tough time to come off a tough loss, go on the road against an uncommon opponent that is Super Bowl bound by every prediction and measure, that they're on path to be one of those teams. And it's just a tough time to do it. I think that they can hang with them and make it a game. I agree with Trevor that it's going to be one of the games of the week. I think it'll be a fun game, but I don't think the Bills come out on the other end of it. But again, bruises sometimes they have to get a little worse before they get better. And I do think that run the table after that is a feasible thing. I'm still not scared of the New England Patriots. No. I'm really not. And I have the rest of the teams I think you can absolutely beat. And
I think they can beat Carolina, New England, Atlanta, Definitely. New York. I think they can close the season
and
with
then take that run into
11 is take the 4-0 run into the playoffs, 11-6, and then we just need to be able to figure out, can we use those 4 games to get right and to get hot at the right time and to kind of figure it out as you go. And then if they get right and they're playing well, they can play with every single team in the NFL. They need to get that crap figured out and find a rhythm and find their version of balance. It doesn't, we've all talked about balance doesn't need to be 50-50. It doesn't even need to be 60-40. Find your version of balance and outscore teams, because that's what it's going to take right now. We know our defense can hang. Our defense can keep us in games. Yep. We need to put up more points. We need more explosiveness on offense. I think that can start this week, and that can be something to hold on to, that, hey, we were right there with the defending Super Bowl champs. We scored X amount of points on them. Let's turn that into something and then go on a run. That's what I'm hoping comes out of this, and hopefully we're both wrong and they win.
Yeah, hopefully they're wrong, and then they'll have a little bit of house money in the bank going into these last handful of games. If you can make it a 5-game run,
now you're better. Now you're talking. Now you're actually talking about Tampa Bay parallels of how they ended the season.
Absolutely.
So, all right, obviously not the prediction that folks are hoping for from us. What are your final thoughts for everybody before we wrap up here?
Yeah, I mean, just try to stay like I just keep hearing this, the season's over, this team sucks, this is terrible. A couple of people put in our Cover One Slack channel, which if you're not in on the Slack channel, it's a really fun place to be, especially all throughout the week, just continuous chat. But saw a couple posts about I forget which years it was, the 89, 88 Bills getting to the AFC Championship game and then declining in 89 and almost missing the playoffs, and sort of like a parallel to there. And I don't love to compare to the 90s teams because it's a totally different era of football, and no salary cap, all that stuff.
Team building was much different then, but
totally. But what I do think it draws a parallel to is progress. It's not always linear. The NFL is very hard. The margins are very slim. There's more parity in this league than any professional sports league in the world. And so while we all had expectations of a Super Bowl and the getting back to the AFC Championship game, it's very hard. It's very hard to do. This has been a really weird year. I was talking to a buddy of mine at floor hockey. We were sitting with the kids talking about the Bills. And I said, for years, I'd looked at the Cincinnati Bengals and people would make fun of them when the Marvin Lewis years, that they were in the playoffs all the time and they never did anything to being in the playoffs. And I was sitting in a 20-year drought. I think we're 16 years into the drought. And I said, God, you know what? I'd love to be the Bengals back then, just consistently in the playoffs. Because once you're in the playoffs, you do have a chance. And for me, my goal and what I ultimately want is the Bills to win the Super Bowl, obviously.
Yeah, the Flacco Ravens run, the Eli Manning runs, the Eagles run. Those are all like lucky, hot at the right time, wild card runs.
Yep, making playoffs matters. And if you get in the dance, you have a chance. And so for me, that's all I'm thinking about right now. The season's not over. There's still an opportunity to make in the playoffs. The Bills aren't in the hunt graphic. They're still very much in the playoff race to be there right now. And so unless they drop a couple games, then you can talk about the wheels falling off in this season and this team's a fraud. But they're not a fraud yet. And the season's not over. So stick with it. It might get a little rough here this week and you might feel like it's the ledge. You're on the edge of the ledge and jumping off, but it's not there yet. They drop games after this, and then we can talk about that. But this is very much to be excited about still going forward.
Absolutely. I think that's really well said. And I don't even have that much to add to it. I think that's exactly the way the fans need to approach this. I think that it's, they need to get some things right. We need to see more out of them. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be disappointed. We did not expect 7-5 at this point in the season. We all expected better than this. Don't let disappointment equal failure. Not meeting our expectations is not the same as everything's a disaster and this is a complete failure. There is still time to get that turned around. It can be a successful season. They haven't done that yet. It doesn't mean there isn't still an opportunity to do it. We just need to see it from them. So we're going to be here for you the whole way. We're going to be previewing every game. We're going to be breaking down everything. We're going to be here with you after this game. We'll be jumping on right around 8:00. It'll be a 4:25 matchup, so it should be wrapping up around 7:30. We'll be jumping on with you immediately following the game, breaking everything down, hopefully celebrating an amazing Buffalo Bills victory. I do think it's going to be a really exciting game. I think that we're going to be in it shooting out back and forth. I think this offense can hang with Tampa Bay. We just got to have the ball last and finish it out. I do think there's a lot more wins to come this season. I think there's exciting things to see and reasons to stick with this team. So stick with us, stick with everybody that we have going on the network at Cover One. Awesome shows with the Roundup, with the Hoof, with the film review, with disguise coverage, with us here. It's been a great time. We're going to be here for you the whole time.
The air raid guys.
The air raid, new guys on board as well, doing a great preview show before each game as well. Jump on board our sponsors, Uncle Jumbo's. I can't wait to try out their new Niagara Frontier bourbon whiskey. Check out our guys over at Underdog Fantasy. Download the Underdog Fantasy app. Use promo code Cover One. But on behalf of Aaron Quinn, I am Greg Thompson. You've been listening to Cover One Buffalo.